Welcome to the webinar. My name is Chris Mabry. I'm your host today, General Manager here at Presales Collective. I was a solution consultant. I'll take you way back 24 years ago. I was in customer success. I've been at startups, mid-market companies ever since. And I switched over to Presales Collective full-time 6 months ago. And we're stoked to have events like this. We have a rocking calendar. Even just this week, we're in Singapore, Berlin, Chicago. We've got webinars all over the place. So thank you for taking a moment to tune in, invest in yourself, invest in the community. I highly recommend throw some comments in the chat, share your link, share where you work, right? Like make this meaningful for you. I ask people where they're tuning in from. I love to see all the different locations. We've got Brazil, we have New York City, we've got Atlanta, where Daniel's located, upstate New York, where I'm located. So thank you so much, everyone. The title for today, before I get into that, one question: who loves security reviews and who loves security questionnaires? Crickets, right? Yeah. Daniel was just at RSA and said that was the question he asked everyone. And Daniel, what did they say?
It's the only question I've ever asked with 100% response rate where the answer was the same. And they all rolled their eyes. They said, "Oh, security reviews, questionnaires. I can't stand them."
Yeah. Yeah. So we specifically wanted to focus on this because I don't know about you, but I've had a last minute 600 question security questionnaire drop on me. Has anybody had that experience? Throw a little comment in the chat. Let us know you're there. We've all done it. It's not fun, right? You know the saying, time kills deals. Security review, it's the trickiest time sink in selling in general. Our goal on this webinar is to introduce you to two people who know them very well, introduce you to two people who are trying to solve this problem in their organizations. We want to talk about tips and tricks on how to make them your secret weapon, how to use a security questionnaire and a process that actually helps you win deals instead of that wretched kind of gut sink, hey, we're almost at the finish line and here it is. So we want to cover a couple things. One is we have seen a shift happening in this critical area. There's a deal partnership to pre-sales teams that need to be fully recognized and used with InfoSec and the inner cooperation between these organizations. We know GenAI is quite possibly the most perfect tool to help us with this. In my personal experience, I've never had a GenAI tool for security reviews. We went old school with spreadsheets, like canned answers, and it didn't work very well. I don't know if it really ever helped us win a deal. And the market has changed. And, we have complex security requirements. We have tools, we have processes, we have tips and tricks. We share all that here at Presales Collective. One of the coolest things we do is share what good looks like. It's a term I use in different organizations. And also, I want to kind of double down on the fact that we can use these for good. Okay. So I'm going to introduce you to our two guests today. They're going to do a little bit of an intro. We're going to get into some questions. Please, a little housekeeping. Utilize the chat, blow up the chat, share everything you want. In the Q&A, ask us questions. The more interactive this is, the more we understand where you're at in your journey, the better it is for us, the better it is for the content, the more we learn. We're all busy, right? So let's make the best of it. I'm going to pass it over to TJ Guyton. Is that how you pronounce your last name, TJ? I kind of forget, right?
Wow, you nailed it. Yeah, perfect.
And TJ's at Figma, and he has the coolest webinar setup, apparently. So take it away, TJ.
Yeah, thanks. So, hey, everybody, my name's TJ. I've been at Figma now for about 2.5 years. I was a modern work architect at Microsoft before that. And yeah, I'm currently focused on strategic and enterprise segments. My technical expertise is in things like design thinking, videography, sales, and of course, SaaS, identity and security. And yeah, it's an eclectic but effective mix. And I'm passionate about all of that stuff. So looking forward to talking with you today. Definitely going to try to bring some hot takes of my own. And yeah, a fun fact about me is that my backyard is a digger bee sanctuary. So every spring, there are thousands and thousands of bees in my backyard. And it's amazing. They're very docile and friendly. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation. I'll pass it over to Daniel.
All right. Hey, everybody. Nice to meet you. How do you follow a digger bee sanctuary? I will try to. I hope that they make honey because at some point TJ will have to send me some of the digger bee honey. I'm the VP of product marketing here at Conveyor. I'm an ex-engineer, so this is like kind of my crowd. I don't know how I ended up in marketing, which is what I lead at Conveyor. And I also know monetization because I'm very passionate about cross sales, cross market sales, value positioning. I come from places like Gong, Salesforce, BCG. And my fun fact is, again, I don't know how I ended up working for special forces making spy gear, but I had a top secret security clearance for many years. Again, I don't use any of that in my current day job, but it was a lot of fun while I did it in my early 20s. Back over to Chris.
Yeah, I don't know how I follow up this story. I was telling Courtney before we jumped on, it's like we got a bee colonist named TJ, and we got a special forces guy. I'm just a nerd with a microphone. So thank you guys. I shared your LinkedIn's. Let's all connect. Let's stay connected. If you have any takeaways after this or any follow-up questions, just hit these guys up. Um, I'm going to start with, I like to start with a bit of spice. So walk us through your worst experience. So like, what's the worst experience you've had in a security review? And then we'll get into defining some terms.
Wow, how do you pick just one? You know, there's such a diverse palette of bad experiences. But yeah, and quick disclaimer, like security reviews. When I say review, I think a lot of, and we'll talk about it today, but like getting in the room with people. But all of my bad experiences are security questionnaire specific. Like I really like talking with security and IT, and I absolutely hate security questionnaires. And so one example would be we actually have a thread on our team called SQ Nirvana where we kind of capture these things like memes. And one time it was a mandatory question, was asked to provide the IKEA manual for Figma or a SaaS service. So I thought that one was strange. And one time, another mandatory question was, is your team a whale or a squid? And no one on my team knew what that meant. AI didn't help. The internet didn't help. So if there's anybody out there that actually knows what the true intent of that question was, let me know. But yeah, we answered squid. Really, I answered NA, but yeah, that was what the team decided. So, yeah,
It just threw that in to just get by anything that was like auto response or something.
maybe.
Wow.
I thought it was going to be like some like obscure security term that was going to have like this awesome background story, and I'm still kind of hoping that's the case, but yeah, I have no idea.
All right. Wonderful. Anything to share on that, Daniel? You're good.
I think the only thing I would add there is my favorite is how the questions are designed. I'm sure we've all answered something that looks like explain your business, yes, no, or NA. And I think we've all kind of felt that pain, right? So these things are always designed by a human being. Human beings are trying to answer them. There's a lot of wiggle room in how the questions are organized, but like I would say that's a pretty tough one.
Yeah, that's awesome. Before we get into the meat of the conversation, and we'll jump right into some fun organizational stuff, I want to define terms because, I've never had the most robust security review questionnaire organization myself, and I know many that are joining here are in the same boat. So let's define some terms. So talk to us about security questionnaires versus reviews, those kinds of things. Daniel, you're in this space all day long, so I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. So for folks who are either, very familiar with security review or beginning their security review education journey, we think of security review as simply the process by which a company can build technical trust throughout the sales process that they safeguard data. And why is this important today? Well, everybody is a digital vendor these days, right? Like there are hardware providers, there are software providers, and everybody is selling digital tools. And when digital tools have customer data, how they share that customer data, who that data goes to, how you process it, becomes really important for these companies. And so any company who is putting their vendor through security review is ultimately trying to gauge trust. And it's an important conversation that we need to have. We need to recognize its importance. And the way that a lot of companies engage in that process is by a few different mechanisms. The first is they'll usually send everybody a security review questionnaire, right? Those might look like 30 questions. They might look like 600 questions. If you're talking to JP Morgan, it's an 800 question questionnaire. It's in a really complicated portal. Oftentimes too, they want to bring in an expert who understands where is data moving, how is it encrypted in transit, at rest, things that are really technical. And sometimes throughout that process, depending on the kind of sale, you might also need to bring in an engineering team. So these are people who not only want to have a human conversation that is like, what's happening with the data, but they then want to have an engineering level of conversation. Like, what are you actually processing? What languages are you using to code? Because different security parameters might follow different languages. And so when we think about that as an end-to-end process, the answer is trust. And the question is, can I trust you? And so we find that, there are various ways that people try to probe trust. Sometimes it feels like you're on a tribunal and you have to communicate trust. But ultimately, it really is, are you able to do it succinctly? Are you able to be clear? And can you go at the different levels of information required in order to satisfy that? It's not just a checklist. Security review is a process, and it is not a one-time process. It's annual. It's the life of the relationship. And so it's important to remember that kind of as like a final thought. Security is not just a one-time event.
Yeah, totally agreed with everything you said. And, from my perspective, I think of it pretty simply like there are questionnaires, which are checklists and often are not nuanced. They lack nuance, to put it lightly. And then there's more of like reviews and audits and assessments and talking with security professionals. And it goes back to exactly what Daniel was talking about, of a shared understanding of the actual risk of your platform. That's something I'm always trying to get from security teams, and that mutual trust. And yeah, that's why I really like getting in the room with security and IT and talking through that, because we can build relationships and we can actually develop a meaningful shared understanding. And I find that, a few minutes, one question, one meaningful, motivated question to a security engineer is more effective than, 500 rows that are expected to cover every potential SaaS tool and beyond. So yeah.
I love that. And I'm going to put this quote. So I'm trying to like record some of my favorite things that you've said. And this is my first one, which is like, it's not a one-time event, but it's a process. I think of this in demoing too. Like a demo isn't a one-time thing you do. It is a process you go through, and it's a process you go through over time. And I never thought about security reviews as the same way. I think that's really interesting. And as somebody who's leading teams, it could help you do things like get budget. It could help you do things like tool around it. Right. So that's like my biggest takeaway so far. And since we're on kind of like, Daniel, you focus on this problem. I love talking to people who focus on a unique problem that we all have. We've worked with tons of organizations, security teams. Who typically works the review process? Like, who's typically the owner more often than not?
Yeah, so we see differences in the owner at different sizes of company. So I would say that ordinarily a little bit lower on the market stack, we think of like SMB mid-market. Tends to be in like an SMB mid-market sale. You will have like a handful of InfoSec managers. They might be the ones who are helping the sales and pre-sales team. They might be doing a little bit of the security review, answering or they might be doing a little bit of the customer facing work, but they're answering the predominant number of the questionnaires. And usually what starts to happen is they specialize as you move up. Right? Like when you start getting into the Figmas of the world and the bigger companies, you get more solutions team who are taking a first pass. Those InfoSec teams start to get a little bit smaller, and they are responsible for quarterbacking not only the technical elements of the sale, but also the technical blockers of getting the sale across the line. Because an InfoSec manager may or may not be comped in the right way to accelerate a deal, but those who are customer facing kind of feel that pain all the time, and so they're really they're trying to accelerate those deals. I would say the last thing is like there's a lot of variation, right? So sometimes I might say something in the mid market and up market, it's like a kind of the exact same experience. What we would tend to find is that up market security reviews tend to be really important, right? Because as you go and sell up market, you're trying to go after usually a bigger customer who has a deeper requirement. So that specialization makes a little bit more sense. And so it can vary a little bit, but that's kind of what we see.
That's cool. Yeah, it seems like It's extremely like nuanced. Like just depends on where you go, how large the company is, how important it is. Question to the audience. I'm curious who is in charge of this process in your org where you work. Just throw it in the chat if you'd like. Also, we have the Q&A open. So if you have any questions as we go through, please pop them in there. We'll make sure to include them in the conversation. I have a second question, which is kind of a pie in the sky question. If you were to design a security process, an RFP process, how would you do it? Like, let's say you can do it totally from scratch. What do you think is your preferred way of seeing this thing organized? Over to you, Daniel. I'll let you answer that one.
Sure. Sorry, we have there's some people who are cutting grass outside my window right now. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound fine.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I think one of the interesting things that we're seeing right now is there's so much tooling around deal scoring, likelihood scoring. And what we see now with like answering an RFP is it takes a huge amount of time, right? Or answering a questionnaire. But obviously, we don't always know if the juice is worth the squeeze. And so one of the things that we've noticed is that as we are seeing deal scoring and likelihoods to close enter the sales process, it's a very good guide for how we should think about prioritization, looking at whether or not the ARR is good, is something that we should be bidding on. And then we kind of get down into like some of the more interesting things, like can customers get to self-serve dependent on their size and spend threshold, right? Like there's more ways that we can get a customer to self-serve their security questionnaires these days. And that burden should not fall exclusively to the pre-sales or for the InfoSec teams. The third thing that I would say is that it's pretty, I mean, obvious that our business is answering questionnaires in seconds as opposed to hours. But being able to do that, what we find allows people to then focus on security as a differentiator, not just at the lowest level of answering a question. And so I would, if I'm to redesign that process, it's, I need to answer every questionnaire immediately so that I can explain what's different. Not why are we better, but why are we different? In a sea of sameness, nobody's going to win on better. We always have to show why we're different. That's like the product marketer, and I'm sure a lot of people hear that from their sales team. And the last thing is adding ways to measure ROI and efficacy of how we resource our teams. Like how often have we gone into a conversation where we say, hey, our team's not resourced to do what we want to do? And that process needs the ability to unlock visibility at every step of security review so we can say, hey, our teams are bottlenecked down right now. We would rather be doing more demos, more technical discovery. And those are the kinds of things that I would unlock from process to generate more business value.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. TJ, you have any insight on that? Any opinions?
I mean, yeah, because you know, at Figma, we've like kind of rehashed this a few times, but I'm really big on self-service these days, not only because I think it's better for SCs and IC solutions, pre-sellers and post-sellers, but I actually have seen like how when we invest in our knowledge base and our trust portal, like the impact of that. And so if I think back to over 2.5 years of all the time that I've spent completing these one-off SQs, if I could invest all of that time into knowledge base and process instead, I think we'd be a lot further along in automating a lot of this than we are today. And so, yeah, in short, I'm big on self-service. Also, self-service is faster. I think when it's done really well, you know, you'll see these things get turned around a lot more quickly. And the hope then is that we're spending all of our energy getting sales, you know, technical sellers in the room with security, IT, and the C-suite. And then that should be the focus, whether we're driving security conversations or upsell conversations. Regardless, you know, I want all of my time to basically be in front of someone if we can. So yeah, that would
well
be my
said.
take.
There's a lot of great comments from Luke. He's asking, how do we talk about how discovery can drive security, which goes back to like security as a differentiator, speed. TJ, your point on, you know, focusing on the right thing, which is being in front of the customer, right? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think discovery is everything, and discovery is really hard when you're trapped in a Excel file with impossible to navigate, you know, and very unnuanced questions. And so for me, one of the things we'll probably talk about a lot today is how there's a bit of a tension with security questionnaires to just do them as quickly as possible. But I found a lot of success doing the opposite and using them to slow things down, using them to mature my network within the customer, get to know some new people, get to understand what their overall security process looks like. And all of this is a process of discovery for me. It's discovery to understand, like, who am I working with? What are the opinions? What is the culture of security at this customer? What kind of things are they going to evaluate us against so that we can start to build a more sophisticated and custom talk track? But I'm doing all of this discovery, building these relationships, and through this, we can actually make meaningful progress towards security improvements. So maybe to cut to the chase and share another story is, I filled out lots of these security questionnaires, including the ones that are 500 plus questions. And for the amount of questionnaires I've completed, the amount of times that questionnaire made a meaningful impact to security is almost none. Versus Gabe Brosby, a seller here at Figma, was recently basically getting ghosted by an account. It had plateaued. We couldn't, get people to respond to us. They had been through the security questionnaire process many times. Like, they were an existing account. We were just looking for expansion. And Gabe had the idea and basically sent a DM to the CTO on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, are you aware that SSO isn't enforced for your organization?" And just that one message got him a meeting with, senior leadership within 48 hours. And guess what? It made a meaningful improvement to the security of their Figma deployment. And so I'm a big fan of things like that. Like, how many security questionnaires I've completed that don't even ask, like, what is our baseline deployment? What capabilities do we have in the tool? Have we enforced SSO? These are the things that get lost in these big, messy documents. And why I prefer this idea of, I kind of like labeling it discovery too. It's like, use the SQ as your platform for discovery to customer. And you can do that pretty successfully, especially if you know a few tricks. And I think we're going to cover some of those too.
I love that. Use the SQ as a platform for discovery. That's a nugget right there, because as you said, it is something that we can use to slow deals down if you need to, if you want to get more information from your prospect. I mean, frankly, I've just never thought about this process in that way ever. So that's very insightful. Tons of great comments in here. I love that. The term, though, I've heard, Daniel, you mentioned it, and TJ, you mentioned it, on self-serve security reviews. I kind of want to talk about this in a practical way, because we really want to drive a few things in these conversations: theory, experience, what does good look like outside of our existing organization, so we can learn how to get better, and also practical advice for those who are tuning in, something they can use right now, or practical advice on how to get customers to self-serve more often, right? So I kind of want to unpack that. And TJ, hand it over to you. You said self-serve is your favorite way, so let's discuss that.
Yeah, lots to unpack here. So one of the reasons I like self-service is data and insight. So that's another thing Conveyor's kind of brought to the table for me, is I can see prospects and customers, and if they're looking at documents, what have they downloaded? How much time have they spent in our portal? And that is amazingly helpful. It also allows you to show up to calls with like credibility. I can show up and know whether or not the customer is starting from scratch, or if they've actually, done some due diligence and their homework on our security. Self-service is also tricky, because I'm not going to sit here and pretend like you can just self-service and that customers are going to do it. There's always pushback. There's always pushback for self-service. So one, I think having a really good experience is important. And experience meaning, like, what is the user experience for someone who's trying to self-service? I think that is the number one thing that will really block you, because if you finally convince someone to try it and they can't find anything, well, then you've kind of blown your shot at self-service there too. And then finally, the trick that I think has landed me more like self-service than anything else is, if you know it's an account where you want to slow it down, if you know it's an account where you're trying to drive some self-service, go talk to your seller and position the completion of the SQ as something that needs to be done live. Like, a lot of times I'll say, we can't complete this unless we book a bridge and we go through it together. And so we'll put 60 or 90 minutes on the calendar, whatever it takes. will sit in. And at least 10 to 20% of the time, that is enough for them to go in self-service because they're like, I'd actually rather not sit on a bridge. And then for the other 80% of the time where the call gets scheduled, you've already uplifted the SQ into something that's going to allow you to do discovery and something that's going to make a more productive conversation. So you can jump onto that call, start working through a lot of it. I've made really, really good progress in 90 minutes on really big, complex questionnaires with this method. And it's something that I do pretty regularly, at least when it, it's a possibility and when it's something we can try.
That's really cool. I put that in the chat. That's a TJ tip. I'm going to maybe copyright that. To book a session to do the SQ live on the call. So not only does it help you get more discovery, it helps you learn about your customer prospect, but it also can drive self-service if they're like, hey, I don't maybe need to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the experience side, Daniel, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things. So the first one is truly it's an experience, right? And when we think about who should drive that experience, if we only put the capabilities of a lot of these tools in the hands of like an InfoSec team, for example, we might end up with an experience that serves an InfoSec team, but doesn't always serve a customer. And one of the amazing things about solutions engineers and the consultant teams who are client facing is that they feel every bit of the customer experience. And so I would encourage everybody to think about, like, as a business leader or those who want to be future business leaders, start considering, like, what does it mean to be a design partner working in partnership with those other teams who can help them do the heavy lifting for you, but you kind of get to own that experience. And so when we think of self-serve, we think of a few things. Obviously, you can buy tons of tools out there today. You can go self-serve all your gated NDA documentation. Like, a lot of that stuff's going to be on the free side these days. There's really complicated flows that you could set up that like hook in your Salesforce implementation that kind of give you insight into how do you prioritize, how do you check out what leads are coming in with the right information. And then when I also think of self-serve, it's like you want to give them some amount of questioning and answering. And, again, like, it's not perfect today. To TJ's point, like we do a good job of managing that conversation. And what we want to do is continue to offload the low levels of conversation and up level to a high value conversation. So when I think of self-serve, I don't think of it as like a fully automated, no human ever talks to another human. That would be horrible. That's not, I think, where anybody wants to go. We want to get to a point where, hey, the human to human conversations are rich in context, are applicable to your product, and easily communicate differentiation. And that's the holy grail and North Star that we think a lot of self-serve should offshoot a lot of that low-level information and get to the high-value ads.
Yeah, so to add on that, I love that comment. We recently did an event where we talked about how to spend time on critical deals, right? And a lot of us are, frankly, a lot of us are doing more with less these days. Our teams have shrunk, but our responsibilities have grown. We've decided to take on more, but we haven't really grown our personnel. So there's some talk about the tooling in the chat. There's like a few people making suggestions, which I love. Keep doing that. That's good. I always think about how to make business impact, because when it comes to tooling, you have to get budget. Free stuff is cool. I like what you said, Daniel, but like I've never had the best success with like the freeware stuff at a large organization, right? It never gets adopted. It never gets approved. So let's talk about the impact business. Let's say you're trying to go to budget, or let's say you're trying to build a security review council on your team. So how should teams be thinking about how to present the impact on the business side?
Yeah. How about I take a first pass, and then TJ, I'd love to hear your take on this too, because you've purchased and implemented and bought. One thing that we notice is like this is a revenue problem, and if we let it kind of sit in the InfoSec sphere too much, then we need to find a way. Like, it'll get only productivity levels of investment. And so my feeling has always been, you got to go in with $1 billion problem. You got to tie that $1 billion problem to revenue. And when you tie that $1 billion problem to revenue, you need to have metrics that are easily influenced by getting those budget line items. And, when I think of like solutions that are in the revenue space, we want to increase win rate, we want to increase deal velocity or decrease cycle times, and we want to show more attribution of labor spent on revenue outcomes. And so what I encourage people to do is like evaluate tools that give you that first and foremost. And second of all, as you're thinking about putting together the business case, is, you know, there are productivity gains always for a lot of these tools, but no executive's eyes light up when they hear time savings, because what they think of is like, great, your 40-hour work week is now fully stacked tip to tail. And we all know that that's a little bit silly, of course, but usually time savings and productivity don't really get the big budget line items. And so I've found that, like, you know, when we walk in, we just released a State of Security Review 2024 report, and we showed like, hey, here's like the effect of pulling forward deal velocity by 23% and like increasing win rates by 40% plus. Like, these are real measurable outcomes that are benchmarked, and that you can go in with third-party validation and say, look, like, other companies are getting this. If we're not kind of investing, either we will fall behind, or we shouldn't expect the outcomes that some of those do more with less targets that seem to fall in all of our heads seem to imply. So that's kind of my guidance is, you know the metrics, tie it to revenue, and find a way to make it $1 billion problem. TJ, what do you think?
Wow. I will say, I don't think I'm the expert here. So I'm always open to like better ways to capture the impact, especially because if I'm being transparent, it's really easy to get an SQ and complete it and then try to correlate the amount of time you spend on that SQ with like the associated revenue. But in my experience, there is so much variation that's kind of a lost cause. I've spent hours on SQs for 15K deals, and one of our largest customers by revenue and size sent us a 10-question security questionnaire as part of their annual assessment. So it's like it's pretty difficult, I think, in that sense. From Figma's perspective, when we brought in Conveyor, we had to solve a need. We had a very specific need that we wanted to solve. So it was very easy to say, like, this tool does it in the way that we want. So we're going to start utilizing it. And since then, we've just seen its use kind of mature across the SC team. And Figma's really been in this like high growth startup phase for a while. So for a lot of times it was like tooling, get whatever tool you need so that we can like get the job done and scale as fast as possible. And now, of course, I think we're starting to balance out. But in short, yeah, get insights, get metrics. I totally agree with Daniel there. There's no shortage, at least the ones that we've been able to pull. But more so, like, make sure you're using it in a way that actually solves a problem. It's really easy if every solutions consultant on the team is like, don't get rid of this tool because it will severely negatively impact the customer experience and our ability to get the job done. And I think that's kind of the stance we've taken, or at least me. I know that's the stance I've taken. So
Yeah, I love that. Daniel, you guys do a lot of research. So I find that I've seen some reports that are really good. Is there anything you can drop in the chat or anything you can share on on that data? Let's say I am trying to build a business case.
Yeah, I'll give you one more data point that I think about all the time. BCG released a GenAI report, and what they were saying was like, hey, a lot of hype, a lot of sizzle, how much stake? And the answer to how much stake is that everybody thought 2023 was the year of hype, right? Like, we're going to use GenAI, but every business leader said, look, I'm going to make investments, but I'm going to encourage my team to guide me on the utility of a use case. And so what we're starting to find right now, I think, is, is that me? Is that somebody else?
sounds good to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. There's something that keeps dinging in my background. But
That's
Gen
okay.
AI
We
right
can't hear it.
now is on everybody's lips, and leaders think that 89% of them think that 2024 is going to be the year that all those investments start to look at top line growth and productivity. And so basically, it's the way of saying, like, we put our money where our mouth is in 2023, and 2024 is when we expect to see the return. And so I'll drop the State of Security Review 2024 in the chat, and folks can check it out. But the truth is, like, we had a lot of hype, and now it's kind of time to see the stake. And so that's the thing that I'm most excited for is, like, are we going to find the use cases? Are people going to adopt the use cases? And are we going to see the productivity gains that then translate into revenue gains? Because I think if we don't, we'll start to see a lot of different investment mix. But the truth is, companies have thrown a lot of money behind this, and so it's pretty likely, if we're not If your teams aren't starting to use these things, like other companies are. And so like I get worried, like every day I'm using Gen AI more and more.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfectly sets us up to the Gen AI conversation. Because when I think of generative AI, I think of, I think of a tool that can help me with this kind of problem, right? And it's going to speed it up. It's going to make it more accurate. So it's a huge topic when it comes to RFPs, security reviews, this kind of stuff. So what opportunities, and more importantly, what are some of the risks you guys see in these? Um, and I'm thinking anything obviously beyond like free web tools on answering questions, like, but where do you see the risks and opportunities? I'll pass it to you, TJ.
Okay. First things first. I am a huge advocate for increasing the headcount of your compliance teams. So please, if you're watching this and you're a leader, don't think that Gen AI replaces a compliance team. So shout out Jordan, Cole, Berber. They have been the single greatest thing to ever happen to us in our ability to actually manage these kind of, situations in these contexts. And the reason as well, not only have they helped like our team and helped us mature our compliance and our security practice at Figma, but they've put a lot of investment in our knowledge base, and having that robust set of questions and answers that are very detailed and have, regular review and sign off, and we know are fresh, in addition to having like all of our policies and documents together, then Gen AI becomes more and more powerful. And that's another thing we've noticed is that, the big concern with Gen AI is accuracy and precision and the risk of hallucination. And we're talking about security. So it's like especially potent that we accommodate for those things. And so that's why Gen AI is going to be amazing. But you want to train it to be as conservative in hallucinating as possible. And the way to do that is to train it on a large set of data. So no matter what, you still have to go in and have some kind of internal process for collecting, refining, and building this information. Now, I think one thing that I'm really excited to see in the future is Gen AI's ability to ingest and produce its own KBs that we could then sign off on. Because right now I'm finding a lot of the work, a lot of the time consuming work is going to all these different parts of your company and just getting consensus and fact. And when you look at these questionnaires, like they are not playing around, they are trying to assess your company from every possible perspective. And so we're also seeing questionnaires change. And these questionnaires, I think, are changing in ways that generative AI might not immediately address them. And so I can give you a specific example. One that we saw recently was this giant countermeasures document. And it was not just your normal security questionnaire. It was somewhere between 600 and 800 questions specifically about our AWS infrastructure, going feature by feature, asking for precise, answers as to what we've deployed, giving comments on everything. And it's like, that is not a small project. It took us months and months and months of work to do. And generative AI wouldn't have helped there. That said, there are lots of places generative AI is helping us. It's helping us uplift our knowledge base to be more efficient and more robust. It's also, for me, it's helping me kind of bridge the gap between things in the knowledge base, because as Figma's gotten more complex, it's growing. I'm having to track, as an SC, I have to keep up with the product. And then trying to also keep up with all of the infrastructure and the security policy changes and the compliance landscape, like all of that stuff is extremely difficult. And so Gen AI is really good at like connecting the dots. Like if we have 3 different facts in our KV that are knowledge base that aren't related, Gen AI can take those things and then craft a very compelling, snippet of text that explains and accurately, is able to answer questions with nuance like that. So that part is amazing. It's making it a lot easier to just quickly validate my own understanding, quickly answer some of these security questionnaire questions that are worded intentionally to be hard to answer. Like the issue with these old KBs where it was just all you could do was like directly match a question and an answer. They just keep changing the questions so that you can't really do that. So Gen AI is great because it kind of goes around that and says, yeah, I can actually take these different things and create, I can string them together and give you a response that answers the question with precision and accurately.
And that's the magic word, right? Accuracy. And I'll admit, like, I'll do exactly what you're not supposed to do in marketing, and admit that like a lot of accuracy claims out there in the market are a lot of hogwash. Anyone can say we're 95% accurate, we're 82.5% accurate, right? And the truth is, for a lot of these tools, the users start to learn very quickly: are they accurate enough? Are they accurate enough for the claim? And are they helping with productivity workflows, right? So it usually starts there, I find. And like, you can bake off those tools, and you'll find some way of figuring out, like, is it going to look at AWS and all 500 lines of, are you in AWS East, and what prod are you using, and things like that. And usually, like, will fail miserably. One of the things that we're noticing in AI, though, right now, is there's this idea of like AI becoming as much an agent in your organization as opposed to a co-pilot. And what I mean by that is, like, a co-pilot, it's all the rage, right? I'm sure somebody in here probably has a co-pilot of some kind that's like following you around. But those co-pilots, when we think of Gen AI, are really designed for a function. They're not designed for a company. An agent is designed for a company. They're usually built for like a specific user in mind or persona. Whereas the AI agent is kind of built more for like the customer in mind. And so they're thinking about it more holistically. And so if I think then about the Gen AI tools that are starting to see a little bit more success, it's that they're not looking like co-pilots, they're looking like experts. And what does an expert do? They do four things. They know everything, they span functions, they handle complexity, and they take action. And those are like the ways that I think the Gen AI tools of the future are going to start to help people, not as like a co-pilot who might help the sales team, might help the marketing team. They're really somebody who sits there and spans all those functions. And they can do things like they can plan, they can reflect on what they've done, they can judge their own confidence. And I think it's a lot of these human tasks that we're all doing. And so I would say, as we're thinking about the future of Gen AI, like, there's a lot of promise out there. It's going to take a long time to get there, but the way that people are building is really different from organization to organization. So I think, like, as a marketer, it's really tough right now because every tool is super different. There's a lot of claims. And so even as a buyer, I find like we all have to kind of experience a lot of these tools for ourselves. So if you're into that, it's a really exciting time. If you're less into that, maybe wait for all of that experimentation to play out a little bit more. But that's kind of been my experience so far to date.
Yeah.
That's
On the
a
note,
good insight for sure.
on the note of agents, like if a Gen AI agent could go out into Slack and just ping our infra team and say, oh, hey, we need to confirm these things. And then later on, it fills that questionnaire out and I'm able to get it. That would be amazing. So I'm just putting that out in the universe in the hopes that that gets built very soon.
We're adding it to the roadmap, TJ.
There you go. Yeah.
I love it.
Somebody on the call is thinking of their side hustle immediately. That's great. Yeah. And I agree with Danielle. It's like, that's an awesome overview, Daniel. So thank you. Anybody, I wanted to ask this question to the audience in the chat. Just, are you using Gen AI right now? Are you waiting? Are you kind of like lurking in the background, kind of, waiting for something to come to fruition? I find in many of my conversations, we're using AI, but it's like built into the tools we're already bought in on, right? So we may use like an AI add-in on some tool that we've already integrated into our tool set. So please let us know in the audience. To switch gears a bit, I want to see, okay, yeah, using Copilot there. If you have a security review in your queue right now, let's say you're on this, or you're even listening to the recording and you think, I've got one that I have to do. What's the fastest way to make improvements with your relationships to the customer and the deal? So not just on how to get the questions answered, that's kind of on you and your internal process, but let's say I've got one in the back of my head. I almost don't want to get to it. And what's the way that I can actually impact my relationship and my opportunity with that today? TJ, I'll hand it to you.
Good question. It's a bit of a trick question though, because in my opinion, once it's in the queue, you basically need to just get the thing done. The easiest way to torpedo your relationships with your seller, with your customer, is just like let that SQ hang out. So, if it's in the queue, if people expect it to be done, you want to just kind of knock that thing out as quickly as you can. Use all the tools at your disposal to try and carve out that time and finish it. The best thing you can do, though, is to try and get ahead of all of this stuff before the SQ even gets submitted. So as early in the deal as you can, and we say this a lot. I think a lot of pre-sales people will know that we should bring security and identity into the conversation as early as possible. And sometimes it's easier than others, right? Like sometimes you can try to bring it up and it's just the deal isn't at that stage or they don't want to loop that person in. But the more that you can get ahead of that stuff, or the more that you can set these table stakes or these standards early on in an opportunity, the better. So one, partner with your sellers to make sure that you're on the same page with them about how you handle this kind of stuff and the approach you want to take. Definitely identify some top opportunities and try to proactively kick things off. Like security questionnaires tend to just arrive on a certain cadence because they're triggered by like tools internally at the customer. So even if you go to a customer and you say, hey, send me a security questionnaire and I'll complete it ahead of time, a lot of times they're just going to be like, well, that's not really how it works. We'll send it when the thing's triggered to send it across. That said, reviews and assessments, I have had success sometimes getting these things kicked off at a customer. Like I'm a big fan of as soon as I get looped in as an SC, even if I'm doing like a really early stage discovery demo, trying to get connected with security and IT and offer them some kind of a download or an unboxing of the tool from a security perspective. We offer up enterprise deployment reviews and baseline deployment guidance. I do that all the time. I'll go look at the customer's deployment, pick out the things I know I would improve upon if I was that admin, and I just put that stuff together and try to like use that almost as a proposal. And when that stuff is done effectively, you can really quickly get really far into a customer. You can really quickly network and meet new people and uplift it potentially.
I like your take on using these as a way to network and to build relationships and to build trust, right? Besides just filling it out. I think that's a really strong take on the security review. Thank you everyone for your comments. I mean, we got Tim. So many people in here have left great stuff. So thank you, Luke, John. I kind of want to wrap up with but Daniel, I'm interested in trends. So we're keeping an eye close on. We talked to GenAI. You spend all your time in this area, so I want to learn from you. What are the trends you're watching? What are you keeping a close eye on? And what do you want to tell us to look out for?
Yeah, so I think the big one in AI right now that we asked was like, hey, who's using it? Should I be thinking about it? Am I making the investments? We ran a survey recently, and what we found was that 31%, so about a third of companies across different market segments, different verticals, are currently using AI to transform their security review productivity. And another 24% of those are not, but are planning to in the next 12 months. So that's 55% roughly in there, which kind of tells us that we're at this weird tipping point, right? We've seen a lot of hype. We talked about steak and sizzle, and we're starting to see a lot of investment, and now it's kind of like game time. So I think 2024 is going to be the year of like, is the juice fully worth the squeeze? And then the other trend that I'm noticing is that revenue team leadership is starting to measure everything, right? Like it wasn't just that we would measure win rates and velocity. We would look at close rates on, different market segments, and people's teams would get beat up over different market segments. Like who's doing well in mid-market, who's doing well in enterprise, how do we think about deal cycles and things like that. What we're starting to see is back office start to get measured. So time kills all deals. What a wonderful thing that we all say. What are we doing about it? And what we've noticed is that CROs are starting to realize in a world where every CFO is looking at the budget a lot closer, every time we go through legal review, deal desk, finance review, all the back-end process that gums up a deal is a lot of backlog that we are kind of imposing on the selling and customer-facing team that in some ways is just natural company friction, but in a lot of ways is a lot of dysfunction that we're all trying to get past. And so what we're noticing is that it's not just an AI solution that's going to solve all of that. It's AI plus good workflow plus better process redefinition. And we're kind of seeing all those three things take shape together. And so I think that's like the recent trend is revenue teams are realizing we cannot let back office slow down front of house revenue. And so we will measure security review. We will measure legal review. And when we get to those bottlenecks, we will figure out how to solve them because they are resulting in real dollars. And so that's been a change in my world for like within the last 2 or 3 years. I have never seen anybody care about security review. And now CROs are coming into meetings and they're saying, yeah, we got to fix this, especially upmarket. And the last thing I would say is like, the way that a lot of people are pitching this is like, we can't go up market and we can't do big deals if we don't have HIPAA compliance, FedRAMP. And so as we talk about teams pulling in other teams and solving it cross-functionally, what TJ said is right. Like, we love our compliance teams. We need to elevate them in the eyes of our CRO, because let's be honest, a lot of them are not too good at selling themselves internally. But we know, having worked with them, how good they are. And so I think that's kind of like maybe the third trend, if I had to pull one out, is like, it's a partnership. And part of that partnership involves helping those teams sell themselves and connect to revenue. And so I kind of view this as like an exciting time to show all of that value in a new light.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think, if that's not already happening in my organization, if I'm I was a solution consultant, manager, and leader before I came to Presales Collective. If I'm the one that brings that to my CRO, and I'm the one that says, here's an area where you have not focused yet, but here's how much impact it can make on the business. I feel like that would be a heck of a thing to bring to the executive staff, and then back it up with a potential solution, saying, here's how much time we're taking. This is a pain point, but it's not just a time thing, it's a revenue thing.
Yep.
I would take that away from this, and I would think, okay, by maybe Friday, I want to bring that to my CRO. Yeah, wonderful. TJ, any last words on trends or things you're seeing in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I'll plus one compliance again. And I guess I can also speak to trends from Figma, because, we're at this cool stage where we were this hyper growth startup and now we're maturing, and we're like, we sold a lot of customers who now have very big security and compliance demands. So I think if I went back a few years, all of the SQs I was doing at Figma were like rapid fire. It was a lot of net new business or annual SQs. Like an existing customer would send us one questionnaire once a year. We could almost even know what week out of the year we would get an SQ because it was on a rhythm. Now it is nonstop. Larger, more regulated customers, it's not one S. I have a customer right now where it is going on 6 months of constant assessments, audits, and it's great, but we didn't necessarily see it coming. So it's this thing, like, as your company changes, the demands of SQs will change and the relationship of SQs will change. And it's not just this simple, like, we're doing more SQs. It becomes an entire function, almost an entire job to itself to manage some of these accounts. And they have giant teams assessing you as a service provider. So it's like, if all you have is your one low, your IC pre-seller trying to manage that, it is extremely painful. And it's also a disservice to the company, to your customer, and it will impact revenue, because when that customer finds a certain amount of findings or things that you need to change, they will demand it, and they will use their spend as a way to motivate those things at your company. So it goes even more into being forward about relationship building, because it is so much better when you're working with these teams if you have that trust than if they don't have the trust. And I've been in both situations, and I can tell you, I would rather do nonstop security reviews and assessments with a customer where we have that trust than a single security questionnaire from a customer who we haven't established any kind of connection or relationship. And so that's the thing. And considering all the noise and the nuance of security, my last point I'll continue to bring home is just like, get in the room with people, build relationships, and make this security review thing something that's more human, and it will be more productive, I promise. Especially as you're trying to like grow revenue and get to know customers better and improve your own product. I think it's been great because a lot of the customers I have the best relationships with, we've spent a lot of time thinking about how can Figma improve security, and what is that going to take? What does that look like? And it gives me something to go back to my product teams with that's specific. It's tied to revenue. It's well thought out. And that's ultimately what I'm looking for as well, as I look to build those internal cross-functional partnerships. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to land the plane, TJ. Thank you for that.
No problem.
Yeah. I want to wrap this up by thanking everyone who joined live, everyone who's watched it, everybody who's consumed it. Thank you so much for all the comments. Barry, really appreciate you. I put your LinkedIn profiles in there before, but can you share with us the best way to get a hold of the two of you?
Easiest way, LinkedIn, connect, and I'm happy to always chat if folks like.
Same. Please hit me up on LinkedIn. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, thank you so much. My biggest takeaways were, and one of my surprises is this could be used as a tool, as a way to slow things down if you need it, if you need to build a better relationship. Get in the room with those individuals, make the security review a part of building that long-term trust relationship. AI is looking more like an expert than a co-pilot. I think that's a cool way of looking at the trends that you're seeing in the market, Daniel. And also, it's just, this isn't a one-time event. This is a process. It's a process you go through once, twice, again, and again. It's something you're always building towards, especially as you move up market. Thank you for tuning in. Chris Mabry here, GM at Presales Collective. My entire philosophy here is I want every member to interact with us anytime you do, to be learning, connecting, and growing. So thank you very much for tuning in. And until next time, take care.
Thanks, everybody. See you.
Thanks, everybody.